Hi BookTube, it's CMF1267 or Connie. I'm here to talk about the first 5 books that I read this year in 2018. So the first book I read was a memoir, nonfiction. It's called Riverine by Angela Palm. And it is a memoir, like I said. It's pretty fast-paced. Angela Palm grows up in a small town in Indiana, and her house actually sits between 2 different cities, but not really in any one city, which I think was kind of a metaphor for her life of not ever quite feeling that she belonged anywhere. She grew up next to or across the street from a boy that she had feelings for, had a crush on while she was growing up, and that boy grows up to commit a murder, and it ends up serving a life sentence. So a lot of this book has to do with Angela growing up in this small city and trying to get out, and then once she gets out, being drawn back to that city and having to deal with these emotions of how this young man she had known as a boy grew up to commit such a heinous crime. And it was pretty fast-paced for a memoir. In places it was fast-paced, in places it read like a novel. There were a few spots where it was a little spotty and slow, but overall I did enjoy this book. I gave it 3 stars, so that was my first book of the year. The next book I read was for my book club, and it was called Great House by Nicole Krauss. This book none of us in our book club liked. It's sold as a novel, but it actually felt more like several interconnected short stories, and supposedly everything that connected all of these people was this desk. And it was kind of funny that in spots where I would think, I'm just going to DNF this, and it was like right around that time that the author would kind of change things up and get it to be a little bit interesting so that I'd stick it out and try and see where all this went. And so yeah, that wasn't the greatest book. Again, it was more of an interconnected group of short stories. They were all connected by this desk. There was one young writer who was living in New York. There was a young woman who got I don't know if she was going for a master's degree or something in Oxford, and she meets these she meets a boy and his sister, and they have a connection to this desk. There was a family in Israel who had a connection to the desk, so it was all of their stories that were kind of interconnected in how this desk connected all of them. And again, none of us really liked it. It was 2 stars for me, which isn't horrible. I mean, it had like those parts in the book that, like I said, it kind of picked up to where I wanted to see where the story was going to go, so I kept reading. But then she kind of let us down and get a little bit slow and boring again. So, yeah, Great House by Nicole Krauss. The next book I read was one of my Book of the Month Club picks. I'm not sure which month it was Book of the Month for, but it's The Dark Lake by Sarah Bailey. And this was like a mystery thriller novel. Takes place in Australia. And this was just an okay read. I gave it 2 stars. Once the writing wasn't really anything special, and once they introduced the character who committed the murder, I knew who did it right away. She tried to kind of distract you from that and point you in other directions, but I didn't think she did a very good job at deflecting. And then the main thing that I didn't like about this, the reason it went down to a 2-star instead of a 3-star read for me, was that the main character is a female detective, and I don't know why authors do this. It's like they can't have a woman who's smart and kind of tough like a detective without making them like stupid and weak in some way. So in this book I kind of felt like she threw in this love, like a love interest that was just, I thought it took away from the story as opposed to adding anything to it. So that's why I dropped that down to a 2-star read. The next book I read was another book for a different book club, and it was, or no, I'm sorry, it wasn't. It was a Dave Eggers book. I had read his previous book for a book club. This was The Circle. This book was about the tech industry. A young woman gets a job at a, I guess you would say, kind of like an Apple or one of those, or Google type places, and Dave Eggers kind of makes fun of the tech industry a bit, and it follows this girl's it follows this girl through her job with this company, and I shouldn't say he makes fun of the tech industry. He's more going after social media and how people live their lives through social media now, and kind of making an argument against conglomerates and how easily people will just sheepishly follow along with what they're told to do with these conglomerates. So I actually found it to be a pretty enjoyable read. I did give it 3 stars. There were some areas I wasn't sure if I was really going to like this Dave Eggers fiction, because I had read A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius, which is his memoir about raising his younger brother, and there were these long diatribes or long streams of consciousness that just went on and on and on throughout the book. And you had a couple in here in this fictional account, but I thought all in all it was actually a pretty fun, enjoyable book. It was made into a movie with Emma Roberts, you know. But I did mostly listen to the audio as usual, and the narrator is the same narrator that he uses, it looks like, for most of his books. The guy's name is Dion Graham, and I thought he did a fantastic job. He's probably the only reason I finished the other book, A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius, was because of his narration. So again, his name's Dion Graham. So the 5th book I read this month was a book for another book club. It's called The Paris Architect, and it's by Charles Belfoure. I gave this book 4 stars. This book is about a Paris architect. It takes place during World War II in France, in Paris, during the German occupation. And our protagonist, his name is Lucien. He starts out as a bit of an unlikable character. All his decisions that he's making are very self-serving, all for his own benefit. But towards the end of the book, he starts making very selfless decisions that are very selfless. And I thought this book was very thought-provoking, and that it really makes you think about a time, especially during an occupation, that what you would do. Would you help another human being? They had to make choices between helping another human being and self-preservation, basically, because if they got caught helping the Jews, they would be killed as well. And a lot of times the Jews or the Nazis would come in and kill all the neighbors in their buildings as well. So I thought that this was a really, really good novel. If you're looking for a good World War II novel that has a little bit of a different take on it, and as it's about the occupation of France, I think that you might really enjoy this book. Okay, that was the first 5 books that I read. It was this month, and I will see you with books 6 through 10 later. Bye!